Today, I witnessed something I wish I could unsee. My son Marcus, the boy I poured my heart into raising, was sneaking through my files like a burglar right in our home. The kicker: he has no clue I caught him on camera. He doesn't realize the security setup I shipped off for fixes is back online and flawless. It began 3 days back when I summoned the repair guy to mend the monitoring gear. The thing had been out for weeks, leaving me exposed. A 68-year-old widow on her own since Marcus and his spouse Angelica pushed to stay here and look after me better. The irony stings deep. In the chaos, I totally spaced on telling them about the tech visit. I'd grown so accustomed to them dictating my every move that it just vanished from my thoughts. But I'm grateful for that oversight. Otherwise, the ugly reality might have hit me way too late. This morning, once Marcus headed out for that supposed job meeting and Angelica dashed to the market, I figured I'd test the cams via my phone. The new app the expert set up gave me a live feed of everywhere inside. I nearly postponed it, but an instinct pushed me to check right then. I hit the button and boom! Sharp views of the lounge filled the screen. My pulse froze. Neither of them had budged. There they sat in the living room, my papers strewn over the coffee table like it was their private workspace. Marcus clutched the key binder I stashed locked in my desk drawer upstairs. Angelica pored over sheets, scrutinizing each under the sunlight streaming in. They handled everything with the ease of repeat offenders. "Where's the authentic title?" Angelica's voice crackled through the mic, sharp and scheming. "Albert said we need the real one for the fake to hold water." Albert, that sleazy attorney Marcus crossed paths with at a dive bar, the type who always set my nerves on edge. Suddenly it clicked. "It must be around here," Marcus shot back, his tone laced with irritation. "Mom's obsessive about this stuff. Everything's filed to perfection." The way he spat perfection twisted like a knife. The very tidiness he'd once admired in me was now his weapon. Angelica sidled to the window, lifting a page against the glare. "Check this out, Marcus. The latest valuation puts the place at over $500,000. Albert nailed it. Totally justifies the hassle. That home, earned through 3 decades of grueling shifts as a nurse. The one where I brought up Marcus solo after his dad ditched us when he was only 5. The legacy I meant for him one day, not some loot to snatch while I'm still breathing. With the title transferred to us," Angelica pressed on, "we flip it and tuck her into a tiny spot. A single-room unit should do for her remaining time." Her remaining time. They spoke of me like a ghost already, a mere roadblock to their windfall. Marcus headed to my room next. Another angle showed him yanking open cabinets one by one, hunting frantically. She's got to have a bank vault or similar for valuables, always so guarded about records. Guarded. What used to signal smarts now painted me as flawed. He returned empty-handed, cheeks burning with anger. Angelica stood there, arms folded, patience thinning. "Albert's deadline is Friday for the true deed," she snapped. "No original, no dice. And no deal means we're stuck scraping by on your mom's handouts." Handouts. She meant the $700 monthly I forked over from my slim retirement check for their extras, all to avoid friction under one roof. Clearly it fell short of their greed. "We'll lean on her harder," Marcus muttered, collapsing into my cherished recliner. "Fake some health forms or urgent docs needing her okay. Lately she's been foggy. She won't bother scanning the fine print." Foggy. Sure, recalling details slower comes with 68 years, nothing unusual. Yet they'd sown those seeds, eroding my confidence whenever I pushed back on their choices. What if she smells a rat? Angelica wondered. Marcus just lifted his shoulders, cold as ice. It shattered me. What can she do? Report her boy to the cops. Anyway, post Albert's signatures, it's locked in, no turning back. For the first time, Angelica cracked a grin, smug and vicious. Ideal. So tomorrow we slide in Albert's bogus files, say it's for revising her testament. She'll ink it blind. They rose to tidy the mess of my files, though not with they'd discovered the papers. They piled them up haphazardly, ignoring the careful organization I always kept. It seemed like they weren't bothering to conceal their prying at all. As he exited the room, Marcus paused and stared straight at the camera's location. For an instant, I panicked, convinced he'd spotted me, that he realized I was monitoring their every move, but he simply lingered there, lost in thought. "I hate that we have to resort to this," he whispered, mostly to himself rather than to Angelica. "Having second thoughts." She replied, her voice blending shock and irritation. "No, but—" Marcus exhaled heavily. "She's my mother, Angelica. The one who brought me up single-handedly, pulling double shifts to ensure I had all I required." A tiny spark of optimism flickered in my heart right then. Perhaps traces remained of the kid who'd cling to me during night terrors. Perhaps redemption was still possible for our bond. Yet Angelica approached him, resting a hand on his arm. "Marcus, darling, consider our prospects. Picture the family we plan to start. Do we really want to rely on an aging lady who's becoming more forgetful by the day? This property is our shot at freedom, at crafting a life that's truly ours." And with that poisonous remark, the final remnant of my once decent boy vanished. I observed his face stiffen once more, avarice reclaiming his expression. "You make a valid point," he conceded at last. "We need to prioritize ourselves." They departed the space, leaving me alone in the kitchen, glued to my phone's display like it was unfolding a nightmare on screen. But this wasn't made up. It was my actual existence crumbling right in front of me. For 3.5 decades, I'd shaped that young man. I'd nourished him, dressed him, schooled him, soothed his setbacks, and rejoiced in his successes. I'd toiled to the point of collapse to fund his university education. I'd sacrificed any chance at my own love life to devote myself to him. And now, my proudest accomplishment had morphed into my deepest wound. But Marcus and Angelica were oblivious to one crucial detail, something that would flip their roles from predators to victims before they could blink. I'd captured every word of their talks on record. I held proof of their illicit plot. And after months of helplessness, I finally grasped control over my fate. The battle was only starting, and they were already defeated, unaware of it. In the following 3 days, I led a dual existence I never thought imaginable. Outwardly, I remained the familiar elderly lady, the devoted parent preparing morning meals, inquiring about their intentions, and beaming when Marcus planted a kiss on my brow prior to heading out. Secretly, though, I operated as a covert investigator within my walls, logging each action, dialogue, and scrap of proof tied to the ultimate disloyalty against me. Tech had emerged as my hidden weapon. The software the experts set up on my device granted round-the-clock views from the cameras. I could monitor the lounge, the cooking area, the primary corridor, and even a slice of the bedroom Marcus and Angelica had turned into their secluded haven. Come Tuesday dawn, I caught them mapping out their subsequent actions. Angelica perched on my sofa, laptop flipped open amid a mess of documents. Marcus strode back and forth, visibly on edge. "Albert's got the paperwork prepped," Angelica updated him, scanning the display. "But he'll require the authentic title for the ultimate verification of signatures. Suppose Mom spots it's gone." Marcus fretted, gnawing his nails, a childhood tic I'd long attempted to break. Angelica glanced up, flashing that icy grin I was starting to recognize all too well. "Marcus, she's 68. Those files haven't crossed her mind in ages. Plus, we'll just take it briefly and slip it back before she catches on." Take it briefly. They discussed swiping the ownership papers to my home like it was borrowing a novel from the shelf. But imagine if... Marcus halted abruptly, eyeing the direction of the kitchen where I was pretending to fix midday meals. "Imagine if what?" Angelica pressed. "What if she grows wary? Lately, she's seemed extra vigilant as though she's on to us." My pulse quickened. Had I slipped up that badly? Had they figured me out? Angelica scoffed dismissively. Come on, Marcus. Your mom passes her hours glued to her dramas and muttering to nobody. If she were that sharp, she'd have clocked that you've been fibbing about your job hunt for a full 2 weeks. 2 weeks? So he hadn't even been searching for work, despite what he'd assured me. It was merely a ruse to lull me into security as they advanced their scheme. True enough, Marcus yielded, his tone laced with doubt. It's only that. I sense her disapproval constantly. That's on you, Angelica snapped sharply. You keep idealizing her as some flawless parent when she's actually just a barrier blocking our path ahead. A barrier. The term echoed in my mind like a tolling dirge. To the woman my son had selected as his forever match, I wasn't human. I was merely an item to clear away for their convenience. Moreover, Angelica went on, snapping, he slammed the laptop shut with a heavy bang, and once the place is ours, we could scout out a nice nursing facility for her. Something budget-friendly yet cozy. From the $500,000 we'd get from selling it, we could launch our own venture, and there'd still be a good chunk remaining to ensure she's looked after well. Nursing facility. The word struck me like a punch to the gut. Their scheme involved offloading my home and stashing me away in some facility, all while pocketing the cash from what was rightfully mine. The calculated viciousness of it felt almost expertly crafted. Marcus settled beside her, and for the first time in days, he appeared to unwind. Do you honestly believe it'll pull off? Albert's handled deals like this in the past, Angelica answered, running her fingers through his hair like she was soothing a kid. He mentioned a buddy in the land office who can speed up the title switch. The property will be under our names in just 2 weeks. At most. 2 weeks. They'd orchestrated the timeline with the sharpness of a drill sergeant's orders. And the cash flow, Marcus inquired. Albert's fee runs $25,000 for the full operation. Steep, sure, but consider the payoff. We're eyeing a clear gain north of $100,000. It's a smart bet. $25,000. That's the going rate they'd slapped on my faith, my residence, my role as a parent. Throughout the afternoon, I summoned an unnatural level of composure. I whipped up their go-to dishes. I inquired about their upcoming ideas. I even slipped them some extra cash for a cinema outing. Each grin I plastered on twisted like a knife inside. Still, I required moments to digest the bombshell I'd uncovered and plot my response. That evening, after they turned in, I lingered in the kitchen, nursing a mug of tea and my cell. I replayed the day's audio captures, jotting down key points in my head. I possessed full dialogues laying bare their illicit scheme. I had timelines, identities, precise figures. It was ample proof to shatter their world if I chose. Yet an inner barrier kept me from dialing the authorities right away. Perhaps it was the faint spark of optimism that Marcus might snap out of it, or my urge to gauge the full extent of their audacity, or deep down, a craving for a face-to-face showdown prior to any permanent steps. Wednesday arrived under a gentle drizzle tapping the panes like celestial sorrow. Marcus and Angelica ate their morning meal quietly, trading knowing looks I feigned ignorance of. A fresh strain hung in the atmosphere, hinting at an impending shift. "Mom," Marcus uttered once his coffee was done, "there's a serious matter we need to discuss with you." Here it came, the ambush they'd rehearsed. "Sure, sweetheart," I responded, taking a seat opposite them by the table. "What's on your minds?" Angelica cleared her throat and said an unfamiliar dossier on the surface. "Marisol, we've pondered your upcoming years, your monetary stability." My monetary stability. I questioned, truly baffled by where this was heading. "Yeah," Marcus chimed in, clasping my hand with that phony warmth that now turned my stomach. "We've researched estates, health coverage, those vital arrangements everyone your age ought to sort out." Angelica flipped open the dossier and pulled forth a stack of papers that screamed bureaucracy. A legal acquaintance of Marcus's assisted in drafting these to refresh your official records. Their routine templates, no big deal. Albert, it had to be him behind those bogus filings. What sorts of papers? I probed, mimicking the innocence they anticipated. Essentially, it's to guarantee that should something befall you, Marcus elaborated, your estate and the home's deed are squared away legally. It covers permissions for us to manage your health and finances if you're ever unable to. Permissions to oversee my matters. They aim to hand them blanket authority over my existence. It's all to protect you, Marisol, Angelica chimed with cloying sweetness. Picture a mishap or grave health issue. Absent these forms, Marcus wouldn't be able to assist with any formalities. They passed the stack my way, crammed with dense jargon, blocks of tiny text designed to confound. But I spotted crucial phrases: conveyance, rights delegation, unchangeable authority. I'm not grasping it all, I stated, clutching the sheets and simulating bewilderment. Might you break it down more gradually? A flicker of irritation flashed over Angelica's features, though Marcus held his caring grin. Mom, it's just tedious legalese, he dismissed. The key is you initial right here, here, and here. He indicated spots flagged with tiny X marks. The attorney stressed it's pressing due to tax regulation shifts that might impact you if these aren't filed by month's end. Deception. The whole pitch was a tangled web to rush me into inking without scrutiny. What if I'd like to peruse it all first? What? I questioned. I read slowly, but I need to know exactly what I'm putting my name on. Angelica's composed expression started to fracture. Marisol, she replied, that's more than 20 pages crammed with legalese. You'd spend days trying to grasp it all. And like Marcus pointed out, time is of the essence. Plus, Marcus chimed in, we're confident the attorney handled it right. He's highly regarded in his field. Highly regarded? I echoed, thinking of Albert. The guy they'd admitted pulled off scams like this in the past. All right, I responded at last, setting the documents down on the table. Give me until tomorrow to mull it over. This is a big choice, and I want to feel certain. The quiet that settled in was heavy enough to slice through. Marcus and Angelica shared a glance of worry they couldn't quite conceal. Mom, Marcus pressed, his tone sharpening, we need your signature right now. The lawyer scheduled a meeting for first thing tomorrow, and without the signed forms, the whole deal falls apart. What deal? I probed. Angelica shifted closer, her tolerance worn thin. The chance to safeguard you under the law, Marisol. Do you doubt us? Do you doubt your son? And there it hit. The guilt trip they'd held back as their ace, framing my wariness as a betrayal of kin. Sure, I trust you, I fibbed, grabbing the pen Marcus had laid beside the stack. I simply want clarity. I noticed their tension ease right away. Relief and eager victory glowed on their features. They figured they'd pulled it off. I hovered the pen above the initial sign spot and paused. Actually, I'm calling my physician first to check if this impacts my health coverage. Mom! Marcus burst out, his cool shattering for the first time. No calls necessary, just sign the freaking thing. His yell reverberated like thunder. In that instant, I realized I'd pushed too hard. The act was up. The conflict had ignited. His outburst still lingered in my head as I caught sight of his real self after all these years. Gone was the pretense of affection, the phony grins, the honeyed talk, just raw desperation and rage from a predator whose prey was fighting back. Marcus, I murmured, letting the pen clatter onto the table. Why are you shouting at me? He caught his error instantly. I saw him scramble to rebuild his charming front while wrestling the chaos, but the damage was done. The monster had bared its teeth. Sorry, Mom, he muttered, raking fingers through his hair. I've been under insane pressure. The money woes, searching for work, it's crushing me. Angelica touched his arm in what looked like comfort, but I recognized it as a quiet nudge to rein in his fury. What Marcus is trying to say, she cut in smoothly, is that these paperwork hassles wear everyone down. So it's smarter to wrap it up quick instead of dragging things out, as though my hesitation was some foolish fancy rather than the gut-level alert of a woman who'd just uncovered her family's plot against her. I get that you're overwhelmed. I stated, rising from the chair. But nothing gets my signature until I fully get the implications. I'm elderly, not foolish. The declaration burst from me with a strength I hadn't mustered in ages. I watched them freeze, taken aback by my resolve. "No one's calling you foolish," Marcus grumbled. Yet his voice carried a sharp undercurrent. "Then stop handling me like I am," I shot back. "These files aren't going anywhere until I make up my mind." I scooped up the documents from the table and stashed them in the nearest kitchen drawer. Purely for show, sure, but I had to prove I still called the shots in my own world. Marcus and Angelica lingered at the dining area, murmuring too softly for me to catch. I slipped off to my bedroom, claiming a rest, though really I aimed to replay the chat I'd just endured. Safe in my secured space, I pulled up the phone app. There they sat in my eating area still, but now their voices were low and frantic. "This isn't playing out like we expected," Angelica vented, frustration evident. She was meant to approve it, no questions asked. "She's gotten sharper these days," Marcus noted, "almost like she senses trouble. Have you leaked our scheme to anybody?" "Absolutely not. Give me some credit." Angelica paused thoughtfully, tapping her nails on the wood. "Time to switch tactics. If the soft sell fails, we'll squeeze her differently." "How? Your mom's reliant on our support for plenty, right? Fancy doctor visits, major shopping trips, those add-ons." "Sure, but her retirement check handles the essentials. Precisely the bare minimum." Angelica's grin turned sly. "Imagine if those perks vanished overnight. If she scraped by on just the pension. Marcus I owned. Still unclear about the direction the discussion was heading. Consider this," she pressed on. "Lacking our monetary backing, she'd be forced to drop her private health coverage and rely only on the state-run services. Without access to our vehicle, she'd need to use buses or costly cabs. Without our assistance for errands, she'd end up lugging those bulky loads on her own." The twisted nature of their scheme started crystallizing in my mind. Their goal was to engineer a fabricated hardship in my world, compelling me to rely entirely on them. "It's ingenious," Marcus conceded. The satisfaction in his tone turned my stomach. "By squeezing her wallet, she'll have no option but to approve the paperwork to secure our ongoing aid." "Precisely. And should she push back, we simply explain that we can't continue supporting her due to our unsteady employment, insisting we require firm legal assurances about our joint path ahead to warrant such personal and fiscal commitment." Commitment. They discussed caring for their mom like it was a venture promising profits. "How much longer do you reckon she'll resist?" Marcus inquired. An elderly lady of 68, habituated to a specific degree of ease, abruptly hit with harsh monetary curbs. Angelica lifted her shoulders dismissively. "At most, a couple of weeks." A couple of weeks. The very time frame they'd referenced before for wrapping up the legal deception. They rose from the meal and retreated to their bedroom. I caught snippets of their talk on the finer points of the fiscal coercion tactic. They'd terminate my extra health plan right that day. They'd refuse me the car for clinic visits. They'd quit handling the food runs involving those cumbersome parcels. It amounted to a blueprint for monetary mistreatment, aimed at shattering my mental defenses. And the scariest aspect was its meticulous design. They pinpointed my weak spots precisely and plotted to strike them systematically. That afternoon, as I feigned interest in the television from the lounge, I observed them launching the initial stage of this fresh approach. Marcus dialed the insurer. "Yes, please end Marisol Jones's additional coverage," I overheard him declare on the line. "Starting now. Right. I'm her child and authorized for these dealings." Falsehood. He held no such authority in my matters, yet the firm evidently skipped any confirmation. Angelica, meanwhile, went over the costs they'd been handling lately. She jotted a thorough inventory in her journal. Prescription drugs, rides to healthcare sessions, market trips, sporadic housekeeping aid. "Starting tomorrow, we slash everything," she informed Marcus upon his return from the call. And if she questions it, we say we're facing a money crunch that bars us from the previous level of support. But what if she accepts trimming back on luxuries? "She won't," Angelica shot back with total conviction. "I've studied your mom closely these past months. She's someone who expects a particular routine, a set standard of living. Once she senses that slipping away, she'll endorse anything to restore security. They nailed one truth. I did favor a certain lifestyle, yet they were dead wrong in assuming I wouldn't forgo it to uphold my self-respect and autonomy." That evening, once they dozed off, I settled in the kitchen to devise my counterplan. I possessed tapes of every plot they'd hatched, solid proof of fraud attempts and now senior mistreatment too. Yet I hesitated to alert the officials. Deep down, perhaps that parental instinct lingered, clinging to a faint hope for redemption, granting Marcus a final shot at redemption. I yearned to face him head-on, reveal my full awareness of his schemes, and gauge if traces remained of the boy I'd nurtured. I resolved to activate my strategy the following day. If they aimed to manipulate through mind games, I'd demonstrate the prowess of 68 years' wisdom in response. But initially, I ensured my proofs were duplicated across several spots. I transferred the videos and sounds to a flash drive, stashing it where they'd never suspect. I also emailed duplicates to a dedicated online folder I'd set up just for this. Should harm befall me, or if they contrived to sideline me through legal or bodily means, at least a full dossier of their offenses would endure. Thursday broke with a glaring sunshine that starkly clashed against the gloom enveloping my household. Marcus and Angelica ate their morning meal as though all was normal, yet I sensed the strain, poised to erupt at any instant. "Morning, Mom." Marcus addressed me with phony brightness. Rested deeply, I fibbed. Truth was, I'd lain alert through much of the darkness, mapping out each element of the impending clash. "Great," Angelica chimed in. "Since we have to discuss a few shifts in our money matters with you today, their performance kicked off right there." I perched at the dining table, pretending total ignorance of the bombshell they were about to drop. "What sort of changes?" I inquired, filling my go-to cup with coffee. Marcus shot a significant glance at Angelica prior to pressing on. "Look, Mom, you're aware I've been job hunting for weeks now with zero luck. Weeks on end. That was code for I haven't pulled my weight in ages, and to make matters worse, Angelica chimed in that their nest egg was dwindling quicker than anticipated. Nest egg. They had zilch. They survived solely on my handouts, and everyone in the room was crystal clear on that. "That implies," Marcus went on, his face etched with solemnity, "we'll need to implement a few short-term tweaks to the family budget." "Tweaks," I pressed, even though the response was obvious to me. "Stuff like your extra health coverage, driving the car for routine checkups, and a few of those additional costs we've been handling." Marcus halted for effect. "These are just interim steps, naturally, until we secure something more stable." Something more stable. They meant swindling my home away. "Got it," I murmured evenly, lifting my mug for a swallow. "And what's the stable fix you're eyeing?" Angelica edged closer, her gaze gleaming with eagerness. "Marisol, if we finalize those papers from the day before, we'd gain the official safeguards to invest properly in our household's future. Invest properly by offloading my property and shuttling me to a nursing facility." "Understood," I responded, holding steady as a rock. So those yesterday's forms weren't merely for shielding me legally. They went rigid. I'd just proven I grasped the link between their money woes and the shady paperwork. "Mom," Marcus started, "we're only aiming for what's right for all of us." "Wrong," I cut in, rising from my seat. "You're chasing what's ideal for yourselves, even if it means ruining your mother in the process." The quiet that ensued was total. At last, after all that deception, I'd revealed my hand completely. The battle was out in the open now, full scale, proclaimed, and merciless. The hush in the kitchen expanded like spilled ink. Marcus and Angelica stared at me, blending astonishment with scheming, as though reassessing their rival entirely. I wasn't the gullible parent they'd been stringing along anymore. I was the lady who'd uncovered their scheme and stood prepared to challenge them head on. "Mom," Marcus uttered at length, his tone dripping with phony worry that now turned my stomach. "I believe you're reading our motives all wrong." "Is that so?" I shot back, folding my arms. "Then clue me in on why your cash crunch lines up exactly with your push for me to ink those docs you refuse to let me review." Angelica jumped in with her signature patronizing grin, honed over months of deceit. "Marisol, it's natural you'd feel overwhelmed by this intricate legal jargon." "Overwhelmed?" "No," I snapped, slicing through her words, stabbed in the back. The term hit the surface like an explosion. I watched Marcus recoil visibly, as if the full weight of his actions was dawning on him at last. "Stabbed in the back," I echoed, relishing every bit. By the boy I brought up single-handedly, nourished through my hard toil, schooled at the cost of my own ease. The boy who's scheming to pilfer my home right under my roof. "I'm not trying to take a thing from you," Marcus burst out, slamming his palm down. "Every move I make is for our collective tomorrow." "Our tomorrow?" I chuckled darkly. "Marcus, your scheme puts me in some old age spot, funded by my very own sale. Where in that setup am I kin, instead of just a roadblock?" Angelica and Marcus traded a panicked glance. I'd exposed knowledge beyond their wildest guesses. "I have no clue where these notions come from," Angelica muttered. Her assurance evaporated. "Notions." I fished my cell from my pocket and placed it squarely on the table. "Care for a playback of your precise chatter on scoring a budget-friendly yet cozy spot for my final stretch?" Their complexions went ashen. Marcus eyed the device like a venomous viper. You didn't tape us," he breathed. "Actually," I said with icy composure, "you taped yourselves. You overlooked that the surveillance unit I had fixed up is fully operational, and you neglected to warn me you'd spill your illicit schemes in my very den." Angelica lurched to her feet, toppling her seat in the process. "How long have you been eavesdropping?" "Starting Tuesday," I confessed steadily. "A solid 3 days of footage capturing your plot to fake my autograph, snatch my place, and dispose of me. Full dialogues on Albert, the $25,000 scam payout, and your intentions to unload the estate." Marcus rose as well, resembling a trapped beast more than any danger. "Mom, just hear me out." "Hear what out?" My voice ice appeared in Rose's eyes for the first time during our exchange. "That your spouse views me as a barrier. That you've been deceiving me about your job search while scheming to steal from me. That you value my existence at just the $500,000 my home could fetch." "It's not true," he shouted. Yet his gaze brimmed with tears, raw despair, lacking any genuine remorse. "Then explain it to me, Marcus." I stepped closer until our faces nearly touched. "When Angelica urged you to quit idealizing me as your perfect parent and recognize me as a roadblock, how did you reply?" Nothing but quiet. He realized deception was pointless. I possessed the precise audio of that discussion. Your reply, I pressed on without mercy, was, "You're correct. Time to focus on our needs." Those exact phrases, Marcus. Following 35 years of devotion to you, you chose to discard me. Marcus slumped into his seat, hiding his features behind his palms. Briefly, I believed regret had struck at last, an awakening to his actions, but Angelica refused to yield. "All right," she declared, steadying her poise somewhat. "Suppose those tapes exist. What's your intention for them?" Her query caught me off guard, not due to its wording, but its delivery. No fear, no begging, just bold resistance. "Pardon," I responded. "I'm inquiring about your plans," she restated, folding her arms. "Since Marcus remains your child as far as I can tell, will you truly shatter your household over property?" Her nerves stunned me into temporary muteness. Despite total revelation, she persisted in twisting my perceptions. "Shatter my household," I echoed deliberately. "Angelica, the pair of you have already ruined this home. I'm merely protecting myself." "Protecting yourself," she mocked. A 68-year-old lady on her own with no kin except us. What will you achieve, Marisol? Alert authorities. Accuse your sole offspring. A certain edge in her voice sharpened my instincts. Beyond mere hubris, it carried assurance, like she held undisclosed knowledge. If required, I countered. Angelica grinned, and that grin radiated sheer spite. Who would trust your account? An elderly resident in solitude, admitting to surveilling her relatives, displaying clear trust issues and delusions. I possess evidence acquired unlawfully. She cut in. Recordings captured sans permission in a space where we hold lawful occupancy. Any average attorney could dismiss them as invalid within 5 minutes. My pulse quickened. Could that hold water? Had my captures forfeited validity through my methods? Moreover, Angelica went on, circling the table like a hunter, who'd heed a lady showing evident signs of paranoia, monitoring her loved ones, fabricating plots, withdrawing from society. I'm not withdrawing, I objected, though my tone wavered. She halted before me. When did you last chat with a companion? When did you venture outside for anything beyond essentials? Marcus described your recent conduct, the emotional shifts, the suspicion, the lapses in memory. No, Marcus raised his gaze, and for the initial instant since the clash ignited, he uttered words with a trace of his former assurance. It's accurate, Mother. I've grown concerned for you. That's our motive for urging those papers, to safeguard options if your cognitive state keeps declining, allowing us legal means to assist. Cognitive state declining. They were crafting a counter-story positioning me as the antagonist, the deluded senior misreading affectionate acts as sinister schemes. You both recognize my mind is sound, I asserted, yet uncertainty crept into my speech. Is it? Angelica resumed her seat, exuding the poise of a dialogue master. A lady who sets up hidden devices to watch her kin, who conjures intricate tales of fraud and plots, who balks at routine legal forms from irrational fears. They're not tales, I bellowed. I overheard your schemes. You overheard routine talks about your welfare and safety, Marcus amended. Discussions your troubled thoughts twisted into dangers. It was ingenious, fiendishly so. They flipped the script entirely, transforming my unmasking of their disloyalty into proof of my alleged psychological unraveling. Albert, I pleaded. You mentioned Albert and the $25,000 for falsified papers. Albert's an actual attorney aiding with legitimate filings. Angelica shot back unflinchingly. The $25,000 covers his charges for intricate updates to records, entirely above board, and the assisted living idea, offloading the property. Marcus exhaled like addressing a petulant kid. Mother, we discussed future possibilities for care if you ever require expert attention. It's a consideration every thoughtful household weighs. The ground seemed to crumble under me. All the proof I'd gathered, every recorded exchange, they were twisting into signs of my deteriorating mind rather than their disloyalty. But you called me a barrier, I whispered, my assurance evaporating. We meant your reluctance to arrange your future was hindering our ability to assist you effectively, Angelica replied calmly, like she was addressing someone under psychiatric observation. Mom, Marcus approached, placing his palms on my arms. We're concerned for you. This isn't typical conduct, the suspicion, the claims, monitoring your loved ones. Perhaps you should consult an expert, someone qualified, a specialist, a therapist. They aimed to portray me as unstable, discrediting any opposition to their scheme. Yet then a memory surfaced, one they couldn't distort or twist. If it's all above board, I stated, reclaiming a bit of my resolve, you shouldn't object to having those papers you want me to endorse reviewed by an impartial attorney, not Albert, but my selection. The ensuing quiet provided the confirmation I sought. Angelica and Marcus exchanged glances, revealing the alarm they'd masked behind their fresh tactic of deceit. Naturally, Angelica responded at last, though her tone had shed its earlier assurance. Anytime you'd like. But I recognized the falsehood, and they realized I saw through it. The conflict had shifted to a fresh stage. It transcended mere forged paperwork or pilfered property. Now it involved my mental health, my reliability, my entitlement to trust, and that battle I refused to surrender. The following days marked the most bizarre period I'd ever endured. Marcus and Angelica had altered their approach entirely, yet not in favor of truth, rather, something far darker. They began handling me like I suffered from psychological issues, demanding professional intervention. It began that very afternoon when I overheard Marcus's call that sent shivers down my spine. "Dr. Rodriguez, this is Marcus Jones, Marisol's son," he announced from their space, volume sufficient for me to catch it in the corridor. "I'm deeply troubled by my mother's psychological condition. She's exhibiting intense delusional tendencies. Dr. Rodriguez had served as our household physician for 15 years, a lady I relied on utterly and who grasped my health background more than anyone." "Yes, doctor. Extreme delusions," Marcus pressed on. "She believes we're plotting against her, that we're after her home. She's even set up hidden devices to watch us. We're truly alarmed." The terror of his actions froze me in place. He was fabricating a bogus health profile of my alleged cognitive impairment, leveraging my exposure of their treachery as proof of instability. When did it begin? Marcus hesitated, as though pondering his response deliberately. "Slowly across the past several months, but it ramped up significantly this week. Just yesterday, she outright charged us with plotting to place her in an assisted living facility." Another delay. "Yes, doctor. I get that it's delicate, but honestly, we're frightened. We can't predict the extent of her delusions." Frightened. They'd reframed my uncovering of their illicit plot as a peril to themselves. I dashed to my space and secured the entrance. My fingers shook while launching the recording feature on my device. I had to capture this exchange as well, but attempting to pull the sound from their area, I found a glitch. That particular feed lacked functional sound. Mere chance. I seriously questioned it. Throughout the rest of the day, Marcus and Angelica displayed an over-the-top gentleness that unnerved me more than their prior aggression. They addressed me in gentle tones, as though I were a young kid or someone gravely unwell. "Mom, are you all right?" Marcus inquired every 30 minutes. "No head pain, feeling disoriented. You appear somewhat ashen, Marisol," Angelica chimed in. "Sleeping soundly. Any odd dreams?" Each query was a snare. Admitting confusion would validate their story of cognitive fade. Denying it might suggest I lacked insight into my state. That evening, from my quarters, I caught them outlining the subsequent step in their plot. "Tomorrow, I'll contact Dr. Rodriguez to book an immediate visit," Angelica declared. "We require an authority to formally record the decline in her psyche." "What if she balks at attending?" Marcus wondered. "She won't have a choice. We'll frame it as a standard exam for her hypertension. Once there, we'll confer with the physician separately to detail the true circumstances." "Do you believe the doctor will side with us, Marcus?" "As her relatives, yes. We've shared her daily life, witnessed her actions firsthand. Plus, delusions among seniors occur frequently. The doctor has encountered similar instances." They were correct on that point. Elderly paranoia was a known issue back then, and physicians encountered it often. Yet what they couldn't invent was a long trail of health records proving my unwavering mental health. Or perhaps they could. The following morning, Friday, Marcus declared over breakfast that he'd booked a medical visit for me. "It's merely a standard exam, Mom," he remarked in that freshly acquired patronizing tone, "to monitor your blood pressure and ensure all's well." "No need for an exam," I shot back. "I'm feeling great." "Naturally, you feel great," Angelica cut in. "Still, at your stage in life, routine visits are essential. Plus, you've seemed off recently. Edgier, more suspicious." "I'm not edgy or suspicious," I stated resolutely. I'm vigilant now that I've uncovered my family's plot against me. Marcus let out an exaggerated sigh, as though managing a stubborn case. Mom, come on, no one's plotting against you. That's precisely the kind of notion the doctor should assess. Notions. They'd shrunk my revelation of their illicit scheme down to mere thoughts requiring clinical review. I'm not seeing any doctor, I proclaimed. Oh, yes, you are, Marcus countered, and for the first time in days, his tone regained its edge. It's in your best interest, and ours. And if I say no, Angelica offered a saccharine grin, the one she'd honed to perfection. Marisol, don't make this hard. It's only a basic check with the doctor. What if I refuse anyway? The ensuing quiet spoke volumes. Their gazes revealed they had a backup strategy for that scenario as well. Well, Marcus concluded, we might need to explore alternative measures for your welfare and everyone else's. Alternatives. A forced psychiatric commitment, no doubt. I get it, I responded plainly. That very afternoon, with them supposedly out on errands, I dialed Dr. Rodriguez myself. Doctor, this is Marisol Jones, I announced once I reached her. Marisol, how timely that you're reaching out. Your son stopped by yesterday, deeply troubled about your psychological well-being. My stomach dropped. Marcus had already sown the groundwork for his fabricated tale. Doctor, I must discuss this with you face to face, but away from the visit Marcus arranged privately. A brief silence followed. Marisol, are you secure at home? Does your son treat you properly? It was a pointed inquiry. Dr. Rodriguez was well versed in senior mistreatment cases, yet Marcus had cast himself as the caring offspring rather than the perpetrator. Doctor, my son and his spouse are scheming to seize my property with bogus paperwork. Once I caught on, they aim to portray me as unstable to undermine my claims. A protracted pause this round. Marisol, that's a grave allegation. Any evidence to back it up? They wiped out every trace. They dismantled the surveillance cams, deleted the footage, toyed with my recollections to convince me it was all in my head. And what makes you certain it wasn't? Because just an hour back, I overheard Marcus on the line with Albert, the attorney they're lining up for the falsification. He referenced a $3,000 initial payment and noted Angelica could mimic my handwriting if needed. Dr. Rodriguez jotted down details as I described it. Could you relay the exact exchange? I repeated the dialogue verbatim. I observed her face growing graver with every piece. Marisol, this points to fraud and maltreatment of the elderly. If accurate, authorities must step in. But do you trust my account? Your health records go back 15 years in my care. No hints of mental deterioration or memory loss. Your recent brain scan came back spotless. But Marcus claimed I was showing signs of paranoia. He did express worry, yes. However, after your side, I see a different cause for this so-called paranoia, which is that it wasn't paranoia. It was spot-on awareness of an actual danger. For the first time in days, relief washed over me. I wasn't losing my mind. Nothing was fabricated. My gut feeling had been right all along. What steps do you recommend? I inquired. To start, we'll conduct a thorough mental assessment here to formally confirm your cognitive soundness. Next, I'll connect you with a private investigator who focuses on domestic elder exploitation. Then we'll consult an attorney expert in senior rights. And Marcus, he stays in the dark until we've secured all safeguards legally. Over the subsequent 2 hours, Dr. Rodriguez ran me through an extensive set of mental evaluations, testing recall from near and far, decision-making skills, awareness of place and time, plus logical deduction. I aced them all without a slip. Marisol, she concluded, your intellect is the keenest I've encountered in someone your age. Zero evidence of any mental fading. I can certify that in writing. I'm documenting it now. This evaluation explicitly confirms you're in complete me. My mental sharpness remains intact, and I'm fully equipped to handle all legal and financial matters on my own. We got back home around midday. Marcus and Angelica met me with anxiety they could hardly hide. "How'd it turn out, Mom?" Marcus inquired. "What was the doctor's verdict?" "She assured me everything's in order," I answered evenly. "No issues with my thinking skills, likely just a buildup of tension." I observed their expressions brighten with ease, mixed with a hint of letdown I easily spotted. "Tension," Angelica probed. "What kind? From being on my own, fretting over what's ahead, from the uncertainty surrounding my legal files." I made it up on the spot. "The physician recommended sorting out those forms you hoped I'd endorse at last." Marcus and Angelica shared a glance brimming with restrained glee. "That's wonderful, Mom," Marcus remarked. "So, prepared to put your name on them?" "I suppose," I fibbed, though the doctor advised taking a relaxed look first to grasp precisely what's involved. "Naturally," Angelica shot back swiftly. "Take as long as you like." "Excellent. Maybe we can go over them jointly tomorrow after lunch. I aim to feel entirely confident prior to endorsing, without a doubt." Marcus grinned with that insincere affection I'd long recognized, yet now I harbored my private scheme as well. That evening, as they assumed I was resting, I spent ages on calls. Initially with the investigator, Dr. S. Rodriguez had suggested, followed by the attorney focused on safeguarding seniors. "Ms. Jones," the investigator explained, "we require concrete proof of their deceitful scheme. Would you consent to using a concealed recorder for their talks? Is that permissible? Entirely lawful to capture discussions in your residence amid valid doubts of wrongdoing? In that case, yes, ideal. We'll set up the gear right at dawn. We'll also add discrete lenses in your lounge and eatery areas." The attorney was equally straightforward. "Armed with those audio captures and Dr. Rodriguez's health summary, we'll build a strong defense not just to block the scam, but to pursue legal action against your son and his spouse. Legal action, plot to perpetrate deceit, effort to fake papers, monetary mistreatment of the elderly. This could mean multiple years behind bars, multiple years incarcerated for Marcus, my own child. Any other options?" I wondered. Perhaps a bargain where they drop their illicit intentions for immunity from charges. Still, we'd want firm proof up front for leverage. That evening, as Marcus and Angelica murmured in excitement over their supposed upcoming success, I meticulously plotted the snare awaiting them. Come the document session next day, I'd secure top-notch audio of every utterance. At last, I'd possess the undeniable proof required. The pursuer had turned into the prey, though they remained oblivious. Tuesday dawned under a sharp, bright sky that feigned the close of this ordeal. By 7 a.m. with Marcus and Angelica still dozing, the investigator and a tech expert slipped into my place quietly. In under 60 minutes, they'd fitted premium recorders on my attire and tiny lenses at key spots in the sitting and meal rooms. All stayed unseen, yet primed to seize each phrase and motion in crisp detail. "Keep in mind, Ms. Jones," the investigator reminded me prior to departing, "aim to draw out explicit admissions on their falsification scheme. We require them to state outright that they'll mimic your mark or employ bogus files. Should suspicion arise, behave just as before. Stay helpful, yet wary. That's the demeanor they anticipate post all this." At 2 p.m., per our plan, we gathered at the meal table to examine the files. Marcus had laid out every sheet across the surface, while Angelica positioned a writing tool beside each spot needing endorsement. "Okay, Mom," Marcus launched with his honed, overdone tolerance. "We'll examine everyone so you get precisely what's at stake in signing." "Sounds good," I responded, subtly shifting my top to guarantee the recorder caught it all sharply. Marcus dove into the initial file, detailing it section by section. It truly was a legal authorization, phrased to grant them near total sway over my assets and holdings. "This form," he clarified, "lets us manage your matters should you ever find yourself unable." And precisely what does unable entail? I questioned. Angelica chimed in. You know, if sickness struck, or your recall began slipping, or you just chose it was overwhelming to manage solo, or if you both deemed my recall faulty, I queried with feigned naivety. M. Arcus stiffened a bit. Why on earth would you bring that up, Mom? Because of what went down last week when you accused me of spiraling into paranoia. That was a whole different story, he shot back without missing a beat. You were displaying genuine signs of disorientation. Genuine signs, or ones that just happened to suit your agenda. The quiet that settled in was thick with unease. I observed as Marcus and Angelica shot each other cautionary looks. I'm not following you, Angelica said at last. What I'm getting at is, it's awfully timely that right after I learn about these papers you want me to sign, which I don't totally get. I start having these memory lapses that supposedly give you grounds to step in and run my life. Marcus shifted closer, his restraint starting to fray. Mom, nobody's out to dominate your existence. No. Then tell me why this paperwork hands you the authority to offload my home without even asking me. It doesn't state that at all, Angelica objected. Oh, but it does, I pressed, jabbing at a particular section. Right here. You can manage property however you deem best for the benefit of the person granting it. Marcus let out a weary exhale. Mom, that provision is there for crises only, like if you required costly treatment or chose to move into assisted living. Why do you keep bringing up assisted living? Angelica's tone sharpened noticeably. Because I overheard you mentioning how the $500,000 from unloading the house would cover a decent spot for my final days. Nothing fancy, but workable. Now, the hush was total. Marcus's face drained of color, while Angelica appeared to be scrambling through her choices in her head. I have no idea what you're referring to, she grumbled eventually. Sure you do. Just like you know Albert's no real attorney. He's an expert at cooking up phony papers. Marcus jumped to his feet suddenly. How did you catch wind of that name? From your call on your phone yesterday morning when you warned him the elderly woman was sharper than anticipated and that Angelica might need to mimic my handwriting if push came to shove. The facade crumbled entirely. Marcus stared me down with a blend of dread and rage that echoed the boy he'd been, prone to fits when busted for fibbing. You've been eavesdropping on us, he charged. I've been safeguarding myself, I countered, from my own child who figured swindling me beat earning an honest wage. Angelica inched toward me with measured, intentional steps. Marisol, regardless of whatever you imagine overhearing, you've got zero evidence for any of it. No evidence, you say. I rose from my seat, a peculiar serenity washing over me. Are you positive? I'm dead certain. She shot back smugly. We ensured there'd be nothing to find, like yanking out the surveillance cams in the dead of night. Precisely, Marcus chimed in, pulling himself together somewhat, convinced he'd triumphed. Like wiping out all those so-called recordings of yours and swapping your USB stick. And like inventing bogus excuses for Tuesday morning. That as well, Angelica conceded, her lips curling into a vicious grin. Marcus didn't have any interviews that day. He was right here with me plotting how to deal with a troublesome senior and those WhatsApp chats with the firms. All fabricated. Marcus chuckled. Faking WhatsApp exchanges is a breeze if you're in the know. So you're owning up to staging it all to convince me I was losing my mind. We admit you're a foolish old bat who nearly wrecked our flawless scheme, Angelica snapped. But it won't change a thing. You'll still put your name on these forms. And if I won't, Marcus grinned with sheer spite, we'll fall back on option B, a bogus doctor's note claiming you're unfit to manage your own matters. We've got connections who'll whip that up for a fee. And once that's done, Angelica closed the distance until she was nearly nose to nose with me. We tuck you away in the bargain basement facility possible and flip this property to bankroll what comes next for us. Our next chapter, minus you, Marcus tacked on with icy detachment. Truth is, Mom, you've outlived your usefulness in our world. There it was, the full, stark, undeniable admission of their whole illicit scheme. I get it, I replied evenly, and you harbor not a shred of guilt for stabbing the back of the woman who raised and cherished you. Guilt, Marcus scoffed harshly. For a lady who's kept us scraping by on her scraps when this place could fetch a king's ransom. We've slugged it out in poverty, hanging on your pitiful stipends. Stipends of $700 monthly, Angelica piled on with scorn, when we deserve to live like the wealthy elite. The elite, with my funds, I echoed. With the wealth, that's ours by rights, Marcus amended. I'm your sole heir. This home belongs to me. By virtue of putting up with 35 years of your psychological games, your parental guilt trips, your endless grip on everything. Understood, I murmured, easing toward the window. So this whole mess boils down to me being the villain. 100% on you, Angelica affirmed. Had you been any less self-centered as a parent, had you just handed over the cash willingly, we'd never have needed to go this far. I paused in silence for what felt like an eternity, gazing at the garden where I'd once shown Marcus how to balance on a bicycle, where we'd chased each other during his early years, where I'd imagined future grandkids dashing about one day. At last, I turned toward them and remarked, "Well, it seems I've finally grasped your true natures completely. Now that you've figured it out," Marcus extended the pen toward me. "You can put your signature on these papers and simplify things for everybody." I grasped the pen lightly and hovered it above the initial document. "You know something, Marcus," I said with a grin that left him puzzled. "You're spot on about one detail. What's that?" "That I'm a foolish elderly lady. With that, I let the pen clatter onto the surface. But I'm not foolish enough to authorize my own downfall." The bewilderment etched on Marcus and Angelica's expressions held for precisely 3 seconds until the entrance swung open, admitting the private investigator, a pair of officers in uniform, and my attorney specializing in senior safeguards. "Morning," the investigator announced in a steady, authoritative tone. "Detective Johnson here. Marcus Jones and Angelica Williams, you're both being detained for plotting fraud, trying to fake documents, and exploiting an elder financially." Their astonishment was total. Marcus remained rigid, statue-like, as Angelica edged backward into the kitchen as though she might somehow evade the unfolding scene. "This can't be real," Marcus muttered, staring at me like I'd risen from the grave. "There's zero evidence for any of it." I subtly retrieved the tiny recorder I'd concealed beneath my shirt throughout our exchange and placed it beside the bogus paperwork. On the contrary, I've captured crystal-clear audio of our whole discussion. Tapes where you openly admit your scheme to mimic my handwriting, seize my home, force me into a facility unwillingly, and secure phony health reports to deem me unfit mentally. The attorney approached the table and started gathering the files while clarifying. "Beyond the sound evidence, we've got sharp video footage of everything that transpired, courtesy of the surveillance we set up early today while you slept. Plus, there's a thorough evaluation from Dr. Rodriguez affirming without doubt that Mrs. Jones possesses full cognitive sharpness and total competence for legal choices." Angelica at last spoke up, her words fractured and frantic. "This setup's against the law. You taped us without permission." "Not true," the investigator countered with composed expertise. "Mrs. Jones is fully entitled to document talks in her own home if there's solid grounds to suspect wrongdoing. Moreover, you freely revealed every aspect of your plot without pressure." Marcus snapped to life at last, but rage overtook him rather than regret. "It's all because of you, you hag. Had you acted like a proper parent, treated us as actual kin instead of forever bossing us around, we wouldn't have needed to go this far." "Marcus," I responded with a tranquility that astonished even me. "Over 35 years I pulled extra nursing shifts to supply you with all you required. I set aside any chance of personal relationships to pour everything into your schooling and happiness. I covered your university costs entirely. I bailed you out money-wise whenever employment slipped away. I welcomed you into my home when you were adrift without shelter. As one officer started reciting Marcus's Miranda rights while securing the cuffs, I pressed on, compelled to voice the sentiments brewing inside me for weeks. All I ever sought back was basic regard, truthfulness, and a hint of the parental affection every mother warrants. Yet you viewed me as a barrier to your monetary gains, a bothersome senior you could toy with, plunder, and toss aside once I outlived my value. Angelica, as the other officer fastened restraints on her too, cried out in anguish. We looked after you. We shared your space. We provided companionship. We assisted with every task. You tended to me like scavengers circling a fading creature. I shot back evenly, biding my time until the ideal instant to pick over the corpse. The sole variation is you refused to await my natural end. You opted to hasten it via deceit and mental coercion. As the investigator guided Marcus and Angelica to the exit, he informed me, Mrs. Jones, given the proof we've amassed, the district attorney plans to pursue counts of unlawful plotting, near fraud, paperwork falsification, senior monetary mistreatment, and emotional coercion aimed at rendering a target mentally helpless. That means potential prison terms spanning 5 to 15 years apiece for them, and if I'd entertain some plea arrangement for them, I wondered, sensing that final flicker of motherly affection that refused to extinguish entirely. My attorney stepped in. We might explore an agreement in which they forswear to renounce any future claims on your property or inheritance, maintain a permanent distance of at least 500 feet from you, and undergo mandatory rehabilitation for domestic abuse. In return, he suggested, you might opt against pushing for the full extent of criminal penalties. Marcus, standing at the threshold with his wrists bound behind him, gazed at me with a gaze blending fury and frantic appeal. Mom, he implored, reconsider this. I'm your sole child. Do you truly intend to shatter our family over a mere home? The dilemma that had plagued me for days at last received a straightforward, unyielding response. Marcus, you shattered this family the instant you valued my existence solely by the cash your home could yield. I'm merely safeguarding the remnants of my self-respect and my entitlement to serene living in my remaining years. Once Marcus and Angelica were escorted out, I found myself solitary in my residence for the initial time in months. The quietude was deep, yet not alarming. It represented the hush of reclaimed tranquility, of eradicated threats, of disloyalty at last unveiled and addressed. I settled into my cherished recliner, the very one where I'd frequently soothed Marcus in his youth, recited tales to him, and shared film viewings through his teenage years. Now it reverted to being purely my seat, within my dwelling, in my existence, that at last was wholly mine once more. 3 months onward, Marcus and Angelica embraced the agreement presented to them. They relinquished every claim to my assets, pledged eternal separation from me, and fulfilled the required recovery initiatives. As a result, they endured just 18 months behind bars rather than the potential decade-long term. Certain individuals inquired whether I felt remorse for imposing such severity on my lone offspring. My reply remained consistent. I harbored no sorrow for nurturing him during his vulnerable infancy when he craved affection. I merely lamented not grasping earlier that a mother's compassion ought never to come at the expense of one's own ruin. These days, I reside calmly in my abode, encircled by community members who've evolved into my selected kin. I've come to understand that authentic family arises not from lineage or official papers, but from reciprocal regard, candor, and sincere devotion. Reflecting on the ordeal I endured, I recognized that the individual who surfaced from it is more resilient, insightful, and vastly more liberated than she was at its outset. At times, preserving oneself demands the readiness to relinquish those you once believed you cherished above all. enjoyed my tale, and from which town are you tuning in? Share in the comments below. If the narrative resonated, show your backing with a super thanks to help me deliver additional tales like this. Grateful beyond words for your kind encouragement. Eagerly awaiting your thoughts on the story. On display are 2 fresh personal accounts I strongly suggest. My channel holds even more gems. Remember to hit subscribe. Until the next heartfelt account, with affection and admiration.